Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm ready to do my full review on this wonderful little knife. This is my Giant Mouse GMF1 F, which stands for fatty or fat. It is the thicker version of the Giant Mouse GMF1. I got this not too long ago now. I've carried it quite a bit in preparation for this full review, and I'm kind of... I'm glad I'm finally getting to it. It's taken longer than I was expecting to. But yeah, I got this not too long ago, straight from one of their drops. I don't know what the frequency is for them dropping this knife. I have known quite a few people who've had the regular GMF1. I feel like those get dropped a little more regularly, but this kind of fatty version got me to bite, if you will, and I'm really quite glad that I did. So you'll notice right off the bat, this knife is not in its normal sheath, and it has scales on it, which is also not normal. I'm going to review it as is, like this, because this is the way that I like it. So I'll say right off the bat, my recommendation, if you get one of these, based on my preferences, gets way better to get it with this setup. So this is from Oak City Leather, Oak City Leather Co., something like that. I will link them down below. Oak City is what it's called. He's got an Instagram and a site, I believe. And he reached out to me on one of my posts because I had mentioned that I might be wanting to get a set of scales and a sheath for mine. And he said, dude, shoot me a message if you really want to. And I did. And he was able to put this together. He let me pick the color of leather, the configuration of the sheath, the color of the thread, the color of the hardware, all of it. It was really, really cool. And I got like literally to hand select from a bunch of options exactly what I wanted it to look like. I happen to love OD green, and so this is OD green, and I like it. It looks really, really great. So this sheath is set up for kind of horizontal carry. I carry it right next to my like belt buckle area, just to the right of it, so it's easy to get to for my right hand. That's the way it's comfortable for me to carry an EDC fixed blade. I don't really find that I like carrying EDC fixed blades when they're vertical because they just stick out under the bottom of my shirt sometimes, and they're less comfortable if I'm sitting down, standing up. This setup for me is really comfortable, right kind of appendix carry, if you will. Plus, because this loops all the way over, you could carry it scout carry as well. Yeah, I've tried it once, it worked. It's not really my style to put it on the small of my back, but you totally can, because this loop goes all the way around, so you can stick your belt in either side. But yeah, so the sheath and the scales match completely. You'll see it's cut from the same exact leather. It's a nice, relatively thick leather component that's there, or sheet of leather. I don't know how you describe that. The edges are all rounded down really nicely. It fits the lines of the knife perfectly. Everything on here matches up nice. The hardware looks good. I picked this kind of antiqued brass finish, and I think it looks great. I just kind of dig it. So yeah, these are from Oak City Leather, and I'm going to review the knife as it is right here. The way that it came without scales, it didn't feel very confident in my hand. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't like a safety issue, but I wanted more to grab onto. And the sheath that it came in was really, really tight, like very tight, and kind of annoying to get the knife in and out of. So I like this better. That'll be that. So let's talk about the knife itself. This one is in M390, and I don't know if all of the fat versions have been M390. I know on the regular, like skinny version, if you will, I've seen a few different steels. I think there's been N690. I think there's also been M390. There might have been LMAX at some point. They've used a few different steels, and yeah, that is what it is. But this one is an M390. You can see under here, it says made in Italy, so this is one of their Italian-made products. Giant Mouse does have some things made by Riat now. I like their folders, especially that are coming out of Riat. Just the way that they're put together, I think, is a really good thing. But yeah, this feels really high quality. It has a lot of the kind of features that I look for in their folders. It's just a tiny little fixed blade. So let's go through, talk ergos, carry, cutting, and we won't talk action because it's a fixed blade, but we'll go through my pretty typical list of things. So ergonomically, let's start there. This knife fits my hand for its size really, really well. It's a 3-finger knife. My pinky is just dangling out behind here. But with these scales on it, it fills my hand nicely. It feels comfortable, feels pretty well locked in. The shape here, that I've got kind of a groove for my forward finger and then another groove for the next two to land in. I've got jimping up here on the spine, placed a little bit forward, typical Giant Mouse style, and it's just really, really comfortable. My pinky, sometimes it feels like the pinky really doesn't know what to do on a 3-finger knife, but here it does kind of, for me, rest against the butt of the knife a little bit, so it kind of feels like I'm squeezing in on it that way, and I like that. It feels comfortable to me. So as tiny little knives go, this one feels pretty confident with these scales on it. I like that I kind of get a nice solid purchase on it, and for how tiny it is, it feels quite capable. It's still really small, and it's got a really small blade on it too. It's not a big guy, but it's comfortable, and it works. So I like the Ergos. In terms of putting it in different orientations, I find I use this in a saber grip every time that I cut something with it. Hammer grip is fine as well. That works too. Draw cut, surprisingly, pretty okay. It feels a little bit small, but it works. Reverse grip, it's okay. It feels weird to me to not have something to do with like this part of my hand in a reverse grip because that's where so much of my kind of grip strength is my thumb and my index finger. But it's there, like for a relatively light cutting task, you'd be fine in that way. Reverse grip draw cut, I'm going to say is not really so good. I feel like I'm playing with that edge there if I try to get comfortable. So reverse grip draw cut, not so much. But who's doing that with this little thing? I don't know. Not me. So yeah, Ergos are very good on this, considering its size. This is a tiny knife. So it's tiny knife comfortable, but this is not like big knife comfortable, if that makes any sense at all. So let's move on and talk about carry. In the sheath that it came in, I'll touch on it, it carried quite well, all things considered, if you just toss it into your pocket, or like I've thrown it in my fanny pack a bunch of times. Even before I put these on it, I was tossing it in my fanny pack. Great. But in pocket, great too. Kind of feels like a slim wallet. Not a big deal. On the belt, did not work for me, that sheath. It just, for me, it was not great. This, however, on my belt is awesome because it just sits horizontal like that. I get enough hanging out back here that I can pull it out relatively easily, use it. Getting it back in the sheath while it's on my belt is not a problem. It's just, it works. And the way that this rides on my body, it's all very smooth right here. So my dad gut, if it is resting on there, is not problematic. There's nothing sharp happening here, nothing cumbersome or annoying. The whole package is really small, all things considered. So it's a comfortable fixed blade to have on you. Granted, I don't think that there's much more utility in a fixed blade of this size compared to a folder, because this is still kind of size limited. I feel like an EDC fixed blade makes a lot of sense to me if you're somebody who finds yourself doing harder use things than a lot of folders are or should be capable of. This I don't think is more capable than a reasonable size folder. Like, I happen to have my Vero sitting right here. If you look at just the difference in cutting edge and blade length, like handle size, the Vero feels more capable to me. This would never replace a primary folder for me because it feels less capable than a primary folder. But I can carry this as a secondary, and it totally works for anything I require a secondary to do. Yeah, it's literally like the overall size of this knife is barely longer than just the handle of the Vero. So it's a tiny little guy. But yeah, it carries well. It's small, but it is what it is. Let's, I guess, kind of wrap up this segment by talking about cutting performance. I like cutting with this knife. It feels like a good, handy little blade. It's a blade profile that's very much similar to like the Biblio or the Riv. You've got just nice, gradual, easy belly all the way along. You've got a tip on this sheep's foot that actually works quite well for penetrating into stuff. I also find with it being a little fixed blade, I'm either in a saber grip and kind of reaching out and pushing down into like tape and packages and stuff, or sometimes I'll even literally like grab it like this and reach all the way forward to where that tip is, and then I can kind of draw lines with it, which is handy. So the edge that's on it is super, like, very, very sharp. The grind, because this is a fatty one, it's a full flat grind just like all of them are. But it's a little thicker behind the edge than I imagine the skinnier ones are, just because we're starting with a thicker stock. It's not thick behind the edge, but it's not thin either. I do think if it was a little thinner behind the edge, it would kind of suit the tasks that I do with a knife this size a little bit better. Just because slicing becomes pretty important on small knives, because I find most of my tasks are like slicing tasks. Whereas bigger knives, and more robust knives, I might be more prone to do things like chopping with them. I'm never going to chop anything with this. It doesn't have enough heft for it to be effective at that. So, I don't know. I like that it's the fatty version because it feels my hand a little bit better, especially with these scales on it. And it's just like, it feels a little bit maybe cooler or nicer because it is a thick blade stock. You feel like you're getting more M390 for your money or something. But I think it would be a more effective slicer if it was a thinner blade geometry. That said, totally fine for slicing. I haven't felt like this is underperforming at anything I do with a small secondary EDC folder. And so the fact that with this small EDC kind of secondary fixed blade, I'm not lacking in capability. It's cutting just fine. It goes through cardboard, totally fine. I've cut a couple of zip ties with it, totally fine. I've opened a lot of boxes with it, totally fine. Like, it works. It cuts well. The edge that's on it is very sharp. It's retained that edge perfectly through all the stuff that I've done with it, which it should have. It's M390, and I've only had it a couple of weeks, and I haven't been like using it for everything. I've just found some excuses to use it here and there. But yeah, I like this one a lot. I also like that the coloring on this one, that it's one of the coated ones. I think this is a PVD based on just the way that this coating looks, and it's a little bit stone washed, but you get this nice dark blade, and it's all throughout the tang. If you look at these before they have the scales on them, you'll see the whole thing is coated like this, and I think it looks nice. I think it's kind of classy. I think it's also like, if you were to pull out a fixed blade in front of some people, it seems a little more serious than pulling out a folding knife that goes in your pocket. I think that's just a perception thing, but this one I don't think is going to alarm anybody. This seems very kind of tool-like and unassuming, and yeah, I can't see people being very intimidated by this little guy. But I think it's very nice, and it's an effective tool, and it works well, and I like Giant Mouse. I like the guys over there. I feel like this is a good representation of them taking a really small knife and making it work in a normal person's hands. I wear medium gloves, although I fill them out real well. And it's just, they have a way with making tiny work. Like, the Riv is probably my favorite secondary knife that I own right now, because it's so tiny and really pocketable, but it fits my hand well, and it works well as a tool. And this is kind of the same thing. This is like the best, or like the smallest EDC fixed blade that I have, and for its size, it's remarkable. This kind of sits in its own category, though. I guess it would be relatively close in size to like my Jacob Creates Fat Boy. And this carries more comfortably than that one does. But that one does feel a little bit more hardcore, like I could chop with it and stuff. So I guess it depends what you're after. But like, as an EDC fixed blade, if you're looking for one to not replace your primary, I think this is an awesome option, especially once you go through the trouble of putting scales on it and getting a sheath like this. It makes a big difference. So again, I'll link down below to Oak City Creations, or Oak City Leather, whatever it's called, Oak City. I will link down below to the links for them. I should have looked that up before I started filming this, because I'm terrible at remembering exactly how things are named, but I know it's Oak City. And then I'll also link to Giant Mouse, because those guys are awesome, and I like them over there. And they've been pretty supportive of my channel so far. So this is a knife that I purchased. No one gave me this knife. I also purchased the scales and the sheath. Like, I paid for all of this, so no one has bought these words from me. I just genuinely like it. I think it's worked out pretty well, and I've been pleasantly surprised with it. I don't know if this will be like a forever keeper for me. I feel like now that I've done all this work to it, it makes me more hesitant to let it go. I kind of just got this because I saw they were available and was curious, and so if I had kept it stock, I might have sent it on its way. But we'll see. Maybe I'll keep this. Maybe it'll be a kind of a forever knife. Maybe it won't. But it is nice to be able to toss on my belt. It's a great one to be able to toss in my fanny pack and just have an extra little knife on me. So Anyway, thanks guys for watching. I appreciate it as always, and I'll see you on the next one.